Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Walden with the Tulsa Regional Chamber. Welcome to this segment of the BUILD program, which is a series of webinars aimed at providing education and resources to small business owners and their growing team of leaders. Presenting sponsors for the BUILD program are the Persimmon Group and Security Bank. Thank you so much to each of these sponsors, without which the BUILD program would not be possible. We also acknowledge the generous support of the Chamber's small business benefactors who give generously of their resources to support the program of work for the Tulsa Small Business Connection. These are Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oklahoma, Exceptional Leaders Lab, Stride Bank, Southwestern Payroll, and TEDC Creative Capital. Today's segment of the BUILD program is entitled Leadership 360, which will feature the expertise of Bill Fournette, CEO of the Persimmon Group. Bill, thank you so much for joining us, and let's get started.
All right, Allison, thank you very much. And what we're going to talk through today, as Allison mentioned, is the Leadership 360. And when we look at leadership, what do we need to be focusing on more than ever to improve our team's performance? And I'm going to walk you through some different sections around this of what we've put together for you all as leaders. But here's my commitment for today. I want to focus on how to build a better team and how we work together as that team. And that includes increasing our accountability, because it's a struggle with all of the change that's coming at us. And in doing that, creating constructive feedback to develop our team members to be better performers. So as a leader, these are struggles that I see and hear loud and clear with the amount of disruption that's going on. And what I mean by the age of disruption is that the only certainty that we have is that the speed of change is happening faster than ever before. And it's not going to slow down. It makes it more difficult to be a leader today than ever before. And so as I walk you through three different aspects of your 360 as a leader, I want you to think about your organization, your team, your business, and how do you apply these into your respective areas? Because being a leader today is harder than it's ever been, because it wasn't just about the diversity of our labor force, their motivators, their drivers. Since we've seen both from the pandemic, but just the constant amount of change, we have to constantly be adapting to the needs of the market, the customer base, how we operate, and the people that we manage and lead. So to start us off, I want to give you a couple of key concepts, and then we're going to dive into some techniques that you can apply as a leader immediately. The first is this concept of consistency over complacency. And I think this is really important, because as I work across industries, small, mid-size, and large companies, this is a challenge that what we've seen the past 2 years really hit. When disruption hits you, it shines a light to where you've got cracks into how we perform and how we adjust. So here's what I mean by this phrase. We all strive to be consistent. That's what any leader in business wants to have. We want consistency. It enables us to be more efficient, to be more effective, to be able to have reliability in how my team is going to perform. The challenge is that over time, being consistent, having processes, procedures, certain policies that we're all following can lead to complacency. And complacency is when we keep thinking everything looks like it did previously when it's actually changed for us. So you've heard of the old adage that if you have all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That's what complacency is. It's where we think, oh, well, this is just like the last customer or the last project or the last need that we had, when in reality, things have changed on us and we're not adapting. So we keep trying to use our same processes, our policies, and our procedures, but they're not working. So what I want you to think about is, when you look at that consistency, those are my tools in my tool belt. I want to have good rhythmic tools that my team can use over and over again. But I want to challenge this notion of complacency to say, wait a minute, am I using the right tools at the right time? Or do I need to change some of my tools as I go forward? Now, what this has led to then is, how do we think about the world around us that we're navigating through? And as a leader, one of the things that I share is this concept of the map versus the terrain. I love backpacking. I'm active in scouting. And I think that when you're backpacking and out there on the trail, it's so representative of what we're experiencing in the world around us. Here's what I mean by that. We have a map, as I show you here. The map is our plans. It's the way we operate. It's the way we train people to come into our organizations. The map is what we expect to happen. When I go backpacking, that's me looking at where's the water going to be? Where are we going to camp that night? And what's the terrain look like on the map? So I understand, where there's elevation gains or elevation loss. As you see in this image, the red line on this map is actually what we hiked. The black dotted line was actually the trail according to the map. And you'll notice that we diverged from that black line, especially there in the kind of the bottom right. And the reason why is because the terrain, which is the reality in front of us, looked like this. The trail was under snow. We also had an area where we had a rock fall. And the terrain being the reality that we're faced with is we have to make a decision that says, this is our plan. This is our map of what it says we're supposed to do. But if all we follow is the map, we could walk right off the cliff. We could end up in a place we don't want to be. If we say, you know what, because we can't know everything about the terrain, let's just not worry about a map and take off hiking. Well, then that could end up very badly as well. We may not have water. We may not know where we're going to camp and not have availability of safety, and we could end up in an emergency situation. So balancing these two things, having a map or a plan, but also recognizing that there is a world around us that is the ever changing in the terrain. That is what it takes as a leader to be challenging yourself and your teams more than ever. We have to look at what's going on around us. And just because things like processes or techniques or successes got us to this point, we can't sit back and assume that they're going to get us to the next one. So take the map and manage that against the terrain. So when we look at leadership and where we are going as leaders, the left-hand side of this slide, which we call command and control, is how a lot of organizations led themselves for the past 60, 70 years, ever since World War II. It was very directive and it worked fabulously. It allowed us to be incredibly consistent in ensuring that operations at different locations or with different leadership teams, for the most part, managed the same way. This involved the leadership or headquarters giving out orders or directions to their frontline employees. Please go do this, go do that. And we measured those employees based on their technical proficiency and the skill. We also measured them on their completeness and quality of the task that we gave them. And oftentimes we would say, go do these 3 steps and then come back and see me and I'll give you your next steps. The challenge is that over time, what we've seen has been with constant change, that doesn't work anymore. It takes too long for us to go up the organizational ladder to get direction. And it also has put a burden on leaders to say, I have to be on all the time. I have to be available, because what happens if my employees have a question and they don't know how to answer it? So what we've seen is a real shift over the past decade to the right-hand side. It is where the leader's role changes, and their role is focused on helping the employees, the frontline workers, to understand what and why we need them to accomplish, and to give them then the parameters or the boundaries of which we allow them to make decisions or take actions. Like, I don't want you to spend money on this. You need to authorize that through me, but you have freedom to go work with this customer or internally with this particular need. In this case, the flags are being shared by the leaders at the frontline level who want to understand what and why we're doing something, ultimately understanding what success looks like when we're done. And the reason this becomes so important is because then at the frontline level, when they walk into a situation that they were not expecting, on the right side, they're able to go, this is not the situation I was expecting, but I understand what success looks like, and I will adjust real time to achieve that success. That's what we call an outcome. The left-hand side, when that same situation happens, in a command and control structure, most employees say, wait a minute, this is not what I thought I was walking into. I need to stop, call my leader, call my headquarters, and ask them how they want me to proceed. And that takes time that we just do not have the luxury of in this day and age when we see change happening so quickly. So in the age of supply chain disruption, changing in customer markets, generational change at the labor force, as well as in the consumer or customer markets, all of these are swirling around to create this opportunity for leaders to really thrive if they focus on a few concepts. And that's what I want to share with you today. So in the 360, I wanted to share with you today 3 aspects. First is going to be from a strategy of where are you going, the direction you're headed. The second is going to be around your team. And what are some things that you could consider with your team to increase their performance, but also increase their engagement? And that's so important right now, especially as we see retention challenges and we can't be at all places at all times. And then lastly, the one that often gets forgotten by so many leaders is, how do you ensure you take care of yourself? If I was leading a backpacking trek, as I showed you earlier, and I didn't take care of myself physically to the point where I end up becoming the burden, what's the effect that that has on the team? And have I trained and developed my team to be able to lead and manage that trek when I'm not there? So let's dive into this. The first part is going to focus on strategy. And as I go through this, you can pause the video at any point to step back and ask yourself or work on an exercise for you, your team, or your business as I teach you these techniques. The technique that I want to focus on here is called leader's intent. And what leader's intent is to do is to establish what this flag is, this outcome. How do I enable my frontline team members to understand what and why we're trying to proceed towards something? And that will empower you to start to give them that understanding, and then for you to step back and watch where you need to guide or course correct them. So to start that off with, I want you to think first about outcomes over outputs. We've gotten really good in a lot of our companies of going through the motions of doing actions. That creates outputs, things that we can see, read, or create. And that could be anything from a deliverable or a document to an action that we're providing for a customer. But how good are we at really saying why we were doing that activity? And did we yield the result that we wanted from that? That's what we call an outcome. And so people have been working really hard, and I see this across organizations. But what I will hear from a lot of leaders is we're working hard, but we're not moving the needle. And it's because we haven't defined the needle itself. That needle is the outcome. So here's the technique. The technique is a simple technique. It's not easy for everyone to get it first, and I would recommend that you practice this. And it's filling in the blank to this phrase. Success to me looks like blank. Now, the key to this is that it's saying success to me looks like when we're done with an activity or an output, to the leader, what does success look like? I'll give you an example of this, and I'm going to give you a few of these to be able to apply in different aspects of your team or your organization. This is what I see oftentimes. A leader or a leadership team says to an employee, I want you to go and deploy, in this case, software by this date, on time and in budget. Okay, it can be whatever the action is. Go create this, go do blank, come deliver this training. But what if I changed it and said, success to me looks like that for 90 days after we deploy this software, my phone rings only with compliments. Would that change the way you would approach the problem? I can still have the requirements of being on time and on budget. But the question is, as a leader, what does success look like to you when we're done? And for most teams, this would absolutely change the way that they manage it. Instead of just saying, here's an email, we've deployed the software, what have you done to engage the people that are going to be using this? What are you doing to reduce the disruption? I've had in my career times where I go in with a customer and they say, you know what? The project team did it again. Every Monday, they do something to my computer, they change something, and I can't work for the whole day. That would not meet that outcome or success statement that you see below. And that creates a conversation point between the leader and the team to say, how do we get back to achieving that? How do we work through this? And what could we have done differently? So let me give you a couple more examples. I'm going to give you an example first for strategic planning, because depending on your role in the organization, whether you were over just a team, a department or a division of the business, or the whole company, you can use this technique at varying levels. So let me share with you one that I use for strategic planning that I used with a customer. And this was a customer who was submitting candidates to be hired with various customers. So you could switch it over if you're doing sales, and you could say, well, it's to be calling 100 customers a week. That's the ABCs, always be calling. But if this is what I'm measuring my employees by, these transactions, these actions of doing 100 candidate submissions, and if people are incentivized for that, what are they going to do? They're going to submit 100 candidates every month. But are those the right candidates? Were those the right phone calls for a sales team? I would argue that it's not. And we've seen this where we go through the actions, but they're just submitting in order to hit a measure, because people at most are always survivors, and they will adjust to however their success is going to be measured. As leaders, we need to define what that success looks like. So here's the outcome. If instead we said that job seekers become advocates for us, which means they're promoting our company to other people they know, because the process was efficient and we placed them in the right spot with the right organization. That changes it. That doesn't say we have to call 100 or submit 100 candidates a month. It focuses instead of asking the question to the frontline employee, is that candidate the right candidate for that position? And is their experience with us going to be such that they are going to promote our company to their friends and family and anyone else they know in their network because we did this? You see how that changes the conversation a little bit? It focuses on when we're done, a day after, a month after, 6 months after, what does success look like? And it brings an emotional and qualitative side to getting results. It allows you back to the flag to establish a flag that people can use their judgment and their decision making to ultimately say, what am I doing to move us towards that outcome versus what am I doing to just submit 100 candidates, regardless of their quality. So I'm gonna give you a couple of others that are some of my favorites. So in projects, this is where when people don't have an answer to this, what does success look like? If a leader doesn't give it to a person, they're going to fill in the blank. And they're usually going to fill the blank in with whatever they did last time or what got them the least amount of pain, meaning yelled at, frustrated at, whatever that was. So our job as leaders is don't leave this open for misinterpretation. Be clear and by providing it. So this is one where on a project, this is what the person was given. Go do this project by this date. Okay. Well, what if the first outcome was actually this? This is our first project or interaction with this customer. And success to me looks like they're asking for more within 6 months. That could change the way you approach the client from the relationship side and the engagement. But what if same project on the left-hand side, all you hear is go do this by this date. And in reality, the leader wanted this outcome. The customer always changes the direction or scope with us, and they overrun our estimates. So I want you to maintain a margin no matter what. You see how those two projects could run completely differently? One trying to really build a relationship and grow the customer, and especially to get more business. The second one saying, look, this is an issue. We keep having a cost overrun and we have a margin fade. How do I increase this or change this? But if all I've got is the left-hand side, I am hoping that the employee, or in this case, the person leading or managing the project, is doing the right thing. So that's two kind of approaches. One's being more strategic, one's being more tactical. I'm going to give you another one here in a moment that's with your employees themselves. But I want you to think about and practice this approach. And part of it that you can tell is that when you write it the very first time, success to me looks like blank. If your statement starts with a verb, complete this, create this, do this, you don't have an outcome. you have an action or an output. So take that statement when you read it. If it starts with the verb, flip it and ask yourself, how would I know if we were successful from that? So if we were to create a process or create a dinner, okay, if we're at a restaurant, success to me looks like what? Well, we create the meals on time for our customers. Now flip that over and say, well, how would I know if we were successful in that? And is that really what success is driving for? Or is it that the customers are complimenting without asking the waiters on how amazing their dinner was? Or they're referring their friends to make reservations at our business. That's what I'm trying to drive towards. More of what does it look like if we did the action? How would we know that the action was actually successful? All right, here's what this will do. If you do this, this drives us towards being able to grow and scale our organizations because it starts to let you see real results. And it lets you see not just the results, but the judgment of the team members that you have doing this work. That is going to increase confidence. And as you get confidence, one of the most powerful things that we're seeing right now inside of organizations is momentum. Getting wins builds momentum. Momentum creates innovation opportunities of how do we take this now and adapt or adjust it into this new customer or this new need. That allows you to start to delegate more work to people because you have confidence in them. You're seeing that thought process. It's the person who you go, wow, you approach that situation exactly the way that I think you should have. And I'm going to give you more work because of it, or more responsibility because of that. And that enables you to grow. So the key with this approach is first testing out how you do the outcome approach. The second gets into if you're the one that's carrying all of the work on your shoulders right now, and you're doing a lot of your work outside of normal, even business hours, how do you reframe that question? Because I see leaders burning out faster than ever before right now because they have an attitude of the only way to get it done right is for me to do it myself. And this approach of defining the flag using leaders' intent of what success looks like starts to step you towards being able to delegate and let go more. And that leads us to our second one, which is the team. And so how do we get our team performing at the level that we want to be at? Well, first, I want you to think about what is a team. Because a lot of organizations that I work with will say, oh yeah, we're all team members, we're good. Are you really? Because I want you to think about this when you think about team. I'm going to put this up here, which is the best definition of what a team is. And I want you to take a moment to read this definition and think about what phrases stick in your mind that define a team, say, versus a group of people that are just hanging out with each other. Common purpose is one of those. Complementary skills is important because it means we're not always the same. But the one that I really get to as well is mutually accountable. Because here's what's the difference between a team and a group. And I want you to think about this from football. Let's take as a sport. Real teams know that each person has their moments of making a mistake. They have flaws. We're human beings. We're not perfect. But do we call each other out on that all the time? Or do we recognize, no, as a team, we either win together or we lose together? And so what do we as a team need to do to solve those problems? And one of the things that fascinates me is there's two aspects around high performing teams that I work with and study that we, for some reason in business, forget about. If you look at both sports teams and military teams, and I do a lot of focus around special operations, is go look at where they spend most of their time. They spend most of their time practicing. But we don't practice a lot in our business lives. We usually say, hey, great, you're here. Here's the job. Here's the task that I need you to go do. And we start trying to either judge you or coach you a little bit as you're doing the work. But it's all real time. The second thing, though, that we see sports teams and high-performing teams do really well, but we also sort of forget about in business, is watching game film. Game film allows us to look and see, how did we perform? What do we need to do differently as we go forward in a non-ego, non-defensive way? Because the people who we've seen in sports, especially, who don't fit this definition of team, can be the smartest, best player in a position who aren't a team member. They're the person that goes out on ESPN and calls their team members out to the media versus having conversations inside the team, because they are essentially so proud of their skills. They think they're so awesome, but they're not a team member. So ask yourself, do you really have a team? And if you don't, how do I start to move myself to increase my team members to become a team? And so the technique I want to give you in this space is going to be about how we give feedback, because we're very poor at giving feedback in most organizations right now. And it goes to the heart of whether people are engaged and how committed they are to you and your organization. So this stat blew me away when I saw it back in 1994. In 1994, so 30 years ago almost, we knew that most performance feedback that we give people actually makes their performance worse. And part of that is because as soon as you start giving critical feedback, for many people, their brain shuts down back to their fight or flight part of the brain that says, wait a minute, is my job at risk? Are you criticizing me? Like, is this bad feedback in the sense of I might lose my job? And they go defensive and they shut down what we call the prefrontal cortex at the front of your brain, which is allowing you to see your future and to think about your goals. So how do we manage that? How do we prevent that from happening? Because none of us usually go into giving feedback to somebody as it being just a negative experience. We're doing it because we're trying to develop or up-level their skills and capabilities. So I'm going to go back to the technique I shared with you just a moment ago. And I want to show you an example of how to give feedback differently and set performance goals with your employees that can change the engagement. So here's what most employees will get on a performance plan. And you could fill the blank in, change it to a different class, change it to a different action. But in this example, next year, I want you to take this class. Great. That's an action. What does success look like from that? Why am I having the employee do that? When we do this approach, the employee, first of all, puts all the accountability on the leader or on the company. When am I going to get time off to do this? Are you going to pay for this? When's it going to be offered? If instead we said this to the employee, success looks like by this date, you can run this project or you can run this shift without my involvement unless there's a critical issue. Now it changes the conversation into an open dialogue between the leader and the employee, or in this case, the leader being a coach and the employee, to say, do you have the skill? Do you have the experience? Do you have the decision-making kind of framework to prepare you for this? And if not, how do we get that for you? Maybe a class isn't what you need. Maybe it's just shadowing someone for a week or two. That's what you want to be thinking about as you work through this. Is it changes the dialogue to becoming a conversation where the leader and the employee are discussing with each other, and the leader's assessing that employee's awareness of their own capabilities. And sometimes leaders are actually surprised because their employees are better prepared for that kind of a role than they expected it in the moment. They just didn't know it because they didn't have a conversation. So that's taking that technique to first start how we approach setting up that development or that expectation of performance for the employee. Now I'm going to give you a couple of slides here, some things to be careful of and or to apply in your organization. The first is non-specific feedback. So you see these phrases up here. Here's what these say: nothing. An employee does not know what great job means. Great job with what? Was it how I delivered the service? Was it my thinking? Was it the way I approached you as a leader? If you find yourself using some of these phrases, follow it up with a great job doing blank, or in this part of the work that you did. Get specific. Our younger generations, millennials and Gen Z, thrive on feedback. They want feedback. They constantly are trying to develop. And so the challenge becomes, are you giving them enough actionable awareness of what they did well as what they need to improve on? And I'll leave you with one thought about this on the whole nice idea of feedback. One of the greatest challenges I'm hearing in a lot of organizations right now is younger, newer employees don't know if the work they did was good or not. They send it to a leader, they don't get a real response. And they're wondering, was that right? Did I do the right thing? So a couple of things on feedback approaches that I want to share here. The first is ask yourself, do you find yourself starting to do some of these things on the left-hand side or the aggressive approach? Because this is a mistake I see with a lot of leaders. They're not leading with questions, and what they're usually leading with is conclusions or accusations. So on the left-hand side, there's a couple of things I want you to watch for. First is if you're using the word you a lot, that is the same as you pointing a finger at an employee, and that immediately creates defensiveness and shuts them down. The second is absolutes. Absolutes gets into you never do this, you always do this. And if you're doing that with a you, the employee is looking in their mind. They're not even listening to what you're saying in the feedback. They are thinking about, how do I prove them wrong? And they'll look for any one example to be able to go back to and say, see, last week I did blank. Therefore, they negate in their mind most of the rest of the feedback that you give them. The last one is assumptions based, which gets into, well, I heard from other people, or I think you're doing blank, versus facts, which is what you see and or behaviors that you may observe. So on the right side is the assertive approach. Same type of feedback, but instead of me jumping to a conclusion of, oh, you're lazy, I first want to understand, hey, here's what I've observed. The last 2 weeks, you've been late for your shift 3 out of 5 days a week. Help me understand, is there something going on? I want to understand, because I have an expectation that we're all here ready to start the shift on time. That's not me accusing. That's me talking about what I saw. It's got facts based into it. And it allows us to say, this is a problem, and now how do we work together to solve this? This keeps an employee from going defensive and from shutting down their ears as you're giving feedback. The last one to leave you with on this is a set of coaching questions that we will use at times to start to draw a conversation out that can be related to feedback. And what I want you to notice on this, and you can always pause the video here and write these down or take a screenshot of them, but almost all of the questions start with a what versus a why. When you ask a person, why'd you make that decision? Instead of what were the factors that led that decision, or could you walk me through your decision-making process for this example? If I use a why, it immediately puts a person on the defensive. And that's what you want to challenge yourself is, I'm needing an open mind and open ears so they can learn from what I'm giving them. So that's some things on the team. How do we improve our expectation of the employee to up-level their skills, and how do we provide feedback? Our last section is about you. It's about the personal side of a leader, because as I mentioned at the beginning, it's so hard and difficult to be a leader today. I see a lot of leaders that are not taking care of themselves. So the question I have for you first is, are you owning your day, or is your day owning you? And this is more problematic than ever. And I want to put this up here because I see leaders burning out, not just stress. Look, we can all have a rough day, a rough week, a rough weekend. But burnout is when it becomes to a point where we're seeing people leave voluntarily because they're just done. Their decision-making process has suffered. They find very little joy. You'll notice they start to also get often sicker more often. They have more outage time. So this can affect your bottom line, not just because you have to potentially replace or hire someone that maybe you could have prevented this on, but second, because outage time, sick time, quality of product, all that kind of thing suffer when we have burnout. So I put this up there for you to think about, if you see this in yourself or you see this in an employee, then to ask yourself, what are you going to do to change this formula? How do you change this equation or situation to stop this from happening and instead manage your own performance and your work quality life? So I want to give you a technique here, and it's called the Dear Me letter. And again, you can take a snapshot of this, or I'll also give you a link here in a moment that you can also download what I call a power play, and it has the instructions for this. Here's what the Dear Me letter does. This is for you. I want you to think about the end of next year. So let's say that we're going into 2022. I want you to think about January 1st, 2023, 1 year later. And you write a letter to yourself that you're going to open January 1st, 2023. And it's going to tell you what you accomplished, what you did, what you felt during the year from three perspectives. The first is your organization. So that's you as a leader, your team, your department, the company. You're going to write what happened in 2022 in the year previous. Then you're going to do it for you in the role that you're in. How did you develop? How did you grow during the year? What's different on January 1st, 2023 from, say, the moment you write the letter at the beginning of 2022 or the end of 21? And the last one is for you personally. And it's thinking about in your own life, your family, your outside of work life. What did you do? And it's using the power of what we call visualization. We see this with athletes. When they visualize catching the ball in the end zone, the percentage of catching the ball in the end zone is much higher. And you are visualizing your future state versus saying, I'm going to take some actions. I'm going to start exercising. That's great. Most people do that on a New Year's resolution, and most fail. And it's because they didn't say that success to me looks like I can run a half marathon by the end of next year and enjoy it, not just do it, but I can walk the next day. So what you want to think about is these questions that I've got up here. What did it feel like? What did it look like as you went through this? What does success look like for you a year from now compared to today? Then you're going to save these letters off. You're going to make 4 copies, and you're going to open one a quarter to review them to assess, am I on track for this? Am I taking the actions? And if not, what actions do I need to take to get me back on track to realize the future that I said I wanted to have? That's what this does. And it's a great way of kind of stepping back from the fire drills of the week and asking myself, am I on track? So with that, and to wrap this up, I want to give you and summarize some things that you can do. Hopefully what you heard from today from a 360 perspective is you need to be more intentional as a leader, intentional for your strategy, intentional with your team and giving feedback and setting expectations, and intentional with your life with the Dear Me letter. As you go through this, ask yourself, how clear is it to your team or your organization what your priorities are and the parameters or boundaries in which they have freedom to make decisions or take actions? Ask yourself, do we have a rhythm? And when disruption hits you, and it will always hit us because we don't know what's going to happen 2 weeks from now, the fastest way as a leader to get your team stabilized and back on their game is to establish cadence. More disruption, more frequency of touch points. Do you need to know everything you're going to talk about every time? No, but they just know by coming together, we've got a moment to interact. And the last one is, and it's hard in this day and age, and that is to provide focus. Focus as a leader is something we can all own, protecting our team from unnecessary disruptions or issues and enabling them to go through completion and then give them their next activity or steps. So what can you do to provide focus, establish that cadence, and give them priorities and parameters that support your intent as a leader? So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to put this up here. If you're interested, you can text to this number, and what you'll get access to is an ebook that I've got, but it's also got some free power plays. All this is free and we don't spam. It's to give you access to some of the techniques that I shared with you today. It's out there on my website. You're able to access this plus some other techniques for leaders, because my focus on leadership right now is how do we arm you with small little plays, tools in that tool belt that allow you to break the complacency and to be able to move forward. So connect with me, and I hope this was helpful for you and your business. Feel free to go back and rewatch or pause at any moment. Work on some outcomes and think about how you give feedback to your employees.
Thank you so much, Bill. Really appreciate those comments. We do have a few questions and have some time for them. So you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation that companies have been, or some companies have been complacent. Can you share some recommendations that you may have for leaders to overcome that complacency?
Sure. So if you find yourself or your team, you feel like they're just coming with the same response, but you're wondering if maybe things have changed, the first step for any leader is ask your team, what's different in this situation? It's the first question to start with. And you're doing that to assess, has your team asked that question themselves? So, hey, great guys, we're going in with a customer. I know we've done some similar work like this with other customers. How is this customer different? How are their needs different? And that allows you to explore it. And if they say, well, that's a great question, we don't know. Okay, here's what I'd like for us to do. We know how to run this. I want you to go feel that out, ask each other, reach out to the customer, and you come back and give me your insights on how you think this may be different. And then back to consistency, I bring the things that have worked well for us in the past. Think of it like plays in a football game. Okay, I'm seeing something different from this customer, but I always go back to plays that we practice, things that have been successful for us. It's just the order of them may be different, or which plays I call may be different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Good.
For people who are new to leadership, there may be some that are emerging leaders at their small business or considering taking more responsibility. What is the most frequent or most vital challenge you see that they should be addressing right now?
Yeah, so this one, that's a great question. I've been seeing this develop over the last few years. Younger, newer managers or supervisors don't ask a question first of their employee. So here's what they do. They jump to a conclusion. You should know this. You're being lazy. Your work ethic's not good. When I was in that role, then I knew how to do this. They should always be starting with a question first. That is, do they even recognize what you asked them to do? Do they have the skill you're asking? Because if the answer is no to either of those, you can course correct it by either providing them the skill or reframing how you may have communicated with them in the past, versus jumping to a conclusion of you're choosing not to do the job well. It doesn't mean that's still not an issue, but don't start with that assumption. As soon as you do, that employee usually feels that they're the way they're being judged. So start with the question. As soon as you start with the question of, did you understand it, or what did you hear from me? It allows you as a leader to go into a coaching mindset and to say, based on their answer, should they have known this or not? And that changes the dialogue from that point forward.
Yeah, considering yourself a coach, not necessarily just a manager. Yeah,
that's right.
I hear that. One final question.
Okay.
You are a small business owner yourself, right? So you understand what it is like to own or feel like you own the business with all of its successes, all of its issues, which can make it hard to kind of let go of, right? What insights do you have for others to make sure they carve out time for themselves and their families while still obviously managing and directing their small business?
Sure. Okay. So there's two parts that I've learned over my career. They were hard because I am definitely a own it until it gets done kind of person. The first one was I had 3 boys and we did scouts. And so we'd go camping once a month. And what I found from that was creating this intentional moments that I am blocking out on my calendar that allows me to decompress. And in that case, it was amazing because I had myself and my sons. And so I was spending time with them and I was getting a mental break from the technology, from work and everything else. So in being intentional to block time on your calendar and to say no to answering the phone or checking your email. And that goes to the second one. And this is a little darker for some people. You have to ask yourself, how important really are you in other people's lives? And what I mean by that is, if you disappear tomorrow, is the world going to end? Is your business going to end? And if that answer is yes, you need to step back and ask yourself, how do I mitigate or prevent that from happening? Which is usually through delegation and engagement. For most people, the answer is no. And so the answer is that people's lives are not necessarily at stake if you weren't available or if you didn't answer your phone in that 15 minutes when you're sitting down with your family for dinner. When you get to that mental place of realizing it's not drop dead important every time, it allows you to start to take action and make choices that say, I'm with my family. I'm going to honor my time with my family, or I'm dealing with this, whatever it may be. I'm going to focus and be in that moment. And that's a challenge for a lot of us because our phones have enabled us to have this ubiquity or this constant access to everything. And my challenge is you have to be able to step away from that and engage with the people you know or that you're working with in that moment. So that's kind of the little bit harder one. Once you get to that, here's the part that's been wild. People who are carrying all kinds of workload, when I'm coaching them, they get to that realization of, hey, I was able to go for a weekend without my computer with me. it changes their whole outlook going forward. And from there, you can actually work with it to say, okay, how do I develop my people to delegate more? How do I get time for me and my spouse or my family to go do certain things? How do I get back to doing things that I love doing that somehow I've lost along the way because I put work as such a high priority? So as a business owner, it's hard, and we're always carrying the burdens on our shoulders. But being able to start to carve that time out will make you healthier mentally, emotionally, and ultimately physically so that you better lead your organization.
Thank you. Those are great words to leave us with today. This is all for our time, but really want to thank you for serving as our expert on this session of the Build program called Leadership 360. So again, we'd like to say thank you to today's presenting sponsors, the Persimmon Group and Security Bank, as well as all of our small business benefactor sponsors. As for our viewers, thank you for joining us. We hope that this session provided you with knowledge and insight to better support your small business now and in the future. Please check out future segments of the Build program at our website or our YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.